into this round. I was leading with 2 points already. I am rated 1966 going into this tournament. Reed was rated about 1594. So I played d4, d5, c4, e6, knight 3, knight f6, knight c3. So we have, the main position from the Queen's Game of Decline is the 3 knights variation, and Black has a million different options they can play here. Like Bishop e7 is one of the main lines. Bishop e4 is the Rogozin. Knight b7, b6, a6, h6. But Black goes for one of the most solid options, c5. This is the semi-Tarrasch. It's called semi-Tarrasch because if you get rid of these knights on f3 and f6, and you just get the Tarrasch defense, which actually has become more popular in recent years thanks in large part to the work of Daniel Dulov. But okay, we have the semi-Tarrasch, which is a little bit different. So c takes d5 is the main move, and the main response, let me get rid of the open book here. Main response from Black is knight takes d5, and you get this very, very classic middle game. And I've had countless blitz games that goes from here. Like knight takes d5 is by far the main option, and this is all pretty forced. But Black goes for the I wouldn't quite say it's a sideline, but definitely not the main move. C takes d4, and this variation doesn't really have a name per se. I think I remember watching, maybe it was one of the old candidates, and I think Rishuk might have jokingly called this, it's not the Tarrasch, it's not the semi-Tarrasch, it's like the super Tarrasch. It's like the third option for Black. And yeah, they don't take back right away. They include in between moves C takes d4, which comes with tempo on our knight. And so White recaptures, E takes e5, and I went for, I wasn't sure what I wanted to play. There's 2 main lines here. There's this Bishop g5 line, which is a little bit less forcing, and importantly, Black can't really get away with the immediate knight c6 with tempo on the queen, because White can insert Bishop takes knight on f6, and if Queen takes, then we can just either trade first on f6, then take on d5, or just take on d5 immediately. Probably take on f6 is better. And then they also can't really get away with this. Once you retreat the bishop, this knight is basically trapped, and White will have 2 pieces for the rook, and then finally G takes f6. The pawn is just hanging. So that's why knight c6 doesn't work. And once the bishop instead defends, now we're going to be in time to be able to play Queen a4, Bishop e5 in response to knight c6, and White gets a nice version of the IQP. The pieces are active, and yeah, this d5 pawn can be a little sensitive. But okay, I didn't go for Bishop g5. I wasn't too familiar with the theory. Something I looked at a while ago and didn't really remember the details of. So I went with this forcing e4 variation, which goes for this endgame. Black takes, knight g5. So, I did knight g5. So this position in the master's database has shown up something like 300 plus times, and literally 100% of those games, every single one of those games, fall with bishop e6, which is the only move that I really knew. And the main line continues like this, where white gets some activity and some early development, but enough pieces have been traded off the board. So it's equal material. It's very hard for white to prove any kind of advantage here. So I was just hoping I could maybe outplay Reed from this position, but it's really not much for white. But Reed did not go for bishop e6. He's trying to hold on to the bishop pair, which is actually a mistake. So he put king e8. So the point was, the threat was knight takes f7. So the king now defends the f7 pawn. But now I can just develop with tempo now on f7. And yeah, now if you develop the bishop, now not only are you going to end up with without the bishop pair, but you're going to do it when I just comfortably get my pawn back. So I can even just take, and now your king is stuck in the center. This bishop is a monster. This pawn is going to be weak long term. Well, you can never get rid of it really with playing e3. I'm going to castle, rook e1. This just looks kind of dreadful for black. And so, I mean, Reed definitely complicated things here with h6. And so, okay, the only logical move here is knight takes f7, and then he played rook h7. And up until this point, we hadn't used that much time on our clocks. I mean, I think Reed maybe used a little bit of time on deciding to play king e8. But I really tanked here. I went super down on the clock. I spent, I think, like 25 minutes just on the next move. And in part it's because, g5 is coming, and then black will be threatening to take my knight on f7. And, the bishop covers d6. And once the knight is on, maybe escapes through e5, it's not going to have that many escape squares, actually. Like, the bishop takes away the c4 square. The knight takes away the g4 square and the bishop. And yeah, this knight is just a little bit stuck, so I spent a lot of time, also in part because white has a few options. Like, I was trying to find ways to castle queenside in time, like dreaming about getting a rook to d8 to checkmate black. It's completely unrealistic. You can just castles, and then if g5, actually there's this very cute trick where you can even stack the two pieces for the rook, because then you get knight c7 in time. And I end up settling on this move knight a6. Knight b5, forcing knight a6. The point is, knight b5 comes with a threat. It comes with the knight c7 threat, forking the rook and the king. So basically forces knight a6. But this knight on b5 is actually pretty multi-purpose. For one, I'm controlling d6, so I'm adding a potential escape route for my knight on f7. I also control d6 just in terms of preventing the bishop from developing to d6 if I then retreat my knight to e5. And I control d4, which is also potentially useful. So I thought my knight was well placed on b5 and was like a worthwhile inclusion. So I castled, and now g5 came, and while my initial intent was to play knight d6, I ended up changing my mind and going for knight e5, but this was a bit of a mistake. So the idea with knight d6 is I evacuate my knight, and it wins me the bishop pair. And in this resulting position, b3, defending the bishop, in this resulting endgame, it was hard for me to really judge the evaluation here. which it shouldn't be in hindsight. I mean, the board is very, very open, and so having the bishop pair against the knight pair on an open board is a massive advantage. I was a little bit concerned that too much material was coming off the board, and that Black's rooks would get very active very quickly. Like I thought somehow the rook is coming to either c7 or d7. But actually there's not really a good way for this rook to get involved in the game. The king is kind of awkwardly placed. My bishop can either come to b2 or a3. And then my rooks will occupy either the c and d files, or this rook can maybe come to the e file to pressure like this weak pawn on e4. And that's another thing to mention too, is that in any of these endgames, white has 2 pawn islands. Here's 1 pawn island, here's a second pawn island. And black has 3, and this isolated pawn, this lonely pawn island, it's super far advanced and it's difficult for black to defend. So this pawn is going to be weak in any endgame. And you'll see later the resulting endgame that we get later once the position liquidates a bit is fairly similar to this, and you'll see just how dominating the position will be. So I should have gone for this, but instead I went for 95. And the problem with 95 is actually very, very specific, and one that I didn't fully appreciate during the game. Okay, so during the game, we went with bishop c5, which is a logical move. I mean, you're developing your bishop to its most natural square, potential ideas of e3 in the future. The bishop is very active here, stops any f4 ideas while my king is on g1. But Reed, missed an opportunity with this knight b4 idea. And the idea is that you're just getting the knight out of the way so that black can actually play a6. So, and you're doing it just in time actually, because white would like to be able to play b3 and bishop b2, but actually already a6, and there's not a good square for me to put this knight to. So I should have mentioned earlier actually that once black played g5, not only is it threatening the knight and taking away these key squares, but actually the rook is also, its influence is increased over the 7th rank. So importantly, it guards c7 now. So the knight on a6 is no longer tied to guarding c7 himself. And so after knight b4, with the rook taking over responsibility of c7, b3, a6, if I just go back knight c3, now the knight that was on b5 is preventing bishop d6, which I had been worried about during the game, which is in part why I played knight b5 to begin with. I'm not in time to play bishop b2 to defend my knight. And so I would have had to, not get my ideal setup, basically. But okay, bishop c5, b3, engine thinks it's a slight mistake, wants to go for bishop e3, which, if there's ever an exchange, would open up my rook. Which I didn't expect for black to go for the exchange, but what I failed to really appreciate is just how powerful this f4 break is. I mean, I've been considering f4 in other positions, but there's too much. And there's all these tactics during the game which I didn't fully appreciate, where you can actually just sack the knight, because by bringing the knight in, you end up getting forked. So okay, the bishop belongs on e3, not on this long diagonal where it has the most influence, just because this is black's best piece, and we're just trying to trade off their best piece, basically. So b3, bishop f5. Again, similar idea. I can go for bishop e3, which black cannot take now, because now it would just lead to a skewer. But okay, bishop e2, rook d8, rook d1. So we're fighting for control over the d file, which black cannot maintain. Like, black cannot get this rook to d7 importantly because my knight covers the square. and I'm ready to trade on d8 and get my other rook to g1. So actually, white is the one who has full control of the d file, not black, even though black was the first one there. And yeah, the d file is actually like black's king is stuck in the center, and so especially with my bishops like staring down these strong diagonals, with a rook coming in, this is very dangerous for black. And so even though it's equal material, I mean white is borderline just completely winning here. Rook d1, trade. And basically the last moment black had to, even keep the game like somewhat of a fight is to try to trade up the knight, not with knight g4 as was played in the game, but with knight d7. And so I'll come back to this in a second. I want to show what happened in the game first. So knight g4, that allows knight d6, showing the influence of the rook on the d file. This forks the king and the bishop, which forces black to give up the bishop pair. And yeah, now we have a trade. So yeah, going back to that position where instead of we could have had knight d7, if we go down a similar line and black just develops knight b4, when I trade on d7, black can actually take back with the rook. And they're just in time to meet bishop b5 at knight c6 so they don't lose the rook. Without my control over the d file, black's rook becomes very active. And black gets a lot of counterplay. So yeah, going back to the game continuation, if instead as we saw in the game night before, yeah, I could go for knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, and yeah, black just gets pushed around, and I can already start thinking about winning, just straight up winning the pawn on h6. All these pieces become very weak. But okay, knight g4, trade. Yeah, so at this point it's very, very difficult for black. And yeah, this is probably my star move of the game. Kind of inducing a trap. I mean, the instinct is when you have a rook on the open file, so you want to keep the rook on the open file. But in fact, once you've used it to already invade your enemy's camp, you should really be considering about all the cores. I mean, that's kind of the point of being on the open file, is that you can't invade and then start getting some of the horizontal influence. I mean, usually you see it more on the 7th rank, but on the 6th rank it's actually just as useful. And the point is the bishop actually doesn't really have a good square to go to. The bishop is pretty low on squares, so in the game we saw kind of if you don't really look at the position too carefully, the most natural square for the bishop is bishop on b7, which is a huge blunder. But if you try to go bishop g4, the bishop just gets pushed back, and sorry, not this line. Yeah, bishop gets pushed back, and at minimum, I'm winning this pawn on h6. And this is again just completely winning now. I'm up material and still the more active side. And if you have to go back to c8, I mean that's just sorry, not in this position. Sorry, c8. I meant here. That's just kind of sad. I mean the bishop just does nothing on c8. And yeah, I can again continue to just improve. Black is getting pushed all the way back. But the concrete issue with bishop d7 is that it allows for bishop d6, and I'm simultaneously threatening checkmate. Bishop is taking away the one escape square from the king, and I'm threatening the knight on b4. to give up the knight on b4, bishop c6, bringing up the d7 square for the king. Okay, so I inserted this in between move, bishop e6. This again threatens checkmate. I'm taking away the d7 square again, and notice between my bishops I've completely walled off the black king, and so the king is never escaping this fortress. Right? He's only ever able to go between d8 and e8. So okay, I threaten checkmate. Black defends, making black more passive, which is why I included bishop d7. Now I take, and yeah, black inserts a5, but I have no interest in the pawn. I just want to keep black's king completely confined, because now I have all the time in the world. And it's kind of funny, you'll see the engine screams that I blunder like 5 times as I just walk my king up the board, because I did it basically because white has all the time in the world and can afford to do so. But actually, I could just checkmate, which it took me a little bit until I saw this idea that you can swing the rook over to the other side of the board to try to checkmate on the back rank. Because on the king side, this rook has it covered, so we try to shift the rook over to the queen side to checkmate. But okay, I bring my king up, dreaming about checkmating, using my king to help checkmate. I get the bishop goes after, say, b2, then this would just be checkmate, for example. Yeah, and it's only, again, this is a bit of a funny moment that it thinks it's a mistake. It's still checkmate. Black can't really prevent it. And yeah, after rook takes a5, rook a8 is coming, and black can just delay for a move with bishop a6. But yeah, there's no way to stop rook a8. And so in this position, my opponent resigned. And the real lesson is that the big difference between white and black in this game was really the activity. I mean, white's bishops were incredibly active. Black's pieces lacked a lot of harmony. And the initiative that I built in the opening that black had to spend time defending, I used that to activate all my pieces. And so while for most of the game I wasn't up any material, it wasn't until I had this bishop d6 fork threatening checkmate and the knight that I actually won material. Just the piece activity was just too overwhelming for black, and so it was borderline winning basically the whole game. I think it's a little bit unfortunate for Reed that he didn't know that bishop e6 instead of king e8 to defend that f7 pawn was the right way to go, but that can happen if you don't know your opening lines. And so thanks for listening to the analysis of my game from last week.
All right. Oh, I know. I'm really glad it happened in the opening.
Because if it happened during like my 25 minutes.
Oh yeah, that would have been horrible. It was really bad on Saturday though. Which, by the way, I know it's because, like, those are your days off and stuff, but it's, like, 90 plus 30, so it's, like, the time control that you want.
90 plus 30?
Well, the Saturday Swiss is.
I thought it was 60 plus 30.
This, like, Saturday, the weekend Swiss is 90 plus 30, so that's, like, once a month.
Yeah, I mean, I also was just, one of my really good friends,